The piece of paper in my hand was thin, but it felt heavier than a brick. It was an eviction notice. My hands didn't shake as I held it out to the man and woman standing in the doorway of their beautiful two-story home. Their home. The home I had just bought. Their faces, usually twisted with smirks whenever they looked at me, were now blank with confusion. Richard, my father-in-law, squinted at the paper, his reading glasses perched on his nose. His wife, Eleanor, my mother-in-law, just stared at me. Her mouth was a perfect O of shock. The silence was loud. My name is Gayle Moore. I'm 38 years old, and for 10 years, I was married to their son, Brandon. For 10 years, this house was the stage for my slow heartbreak. Every holiday, every Sunday dinner, every birthday party was held here. And at every single one, Eleanor and Richard made sure I knew I didn't belong. They would whisper just loud enough for me to hear. They called me a gold digger, a leech, a girl from the wrong side of the tracks who had trapped their perfect son. Now, I owned their stage, and I was here to burn it down. I remember the very first time Eleanor called me a gold digger. We were at Thanksgiving dinner, just a few months after Brandon and I got engaged. I was trying so hard to impress them, helping in the kitchen and laughing at Richard's bad jokes. Brandon had just given me a beautiful, simple necklace as an early Christmas gift. Eleanor looked at it, then looked at me and said, "It must be nice to finally have nice things." The whole table went quiet. Brandon just squeezed my hand under the table, but he never said a word to defend me. That first cut was the deepest, but it wasn't the last. It became their favorite song, a tune they played over and over again. When Brandon and I bought our first small apartment, they said I was draining his savings. When we went on our first vacation, they said I was wasting the money he worked so hard for. They planted seeds of doubt in my husband's mind every single day. They were like poison, slowly dripping into the roots of our marriage. I smiled through the pain, hoping that one day they would see that I truly loved their son. But they didn't just want me to feel bad, they wanted me gone. And they had a secret plan to make it happen, a plan so cruel that it shattered my world into a million tiny pieces. I was a fool for so long, thinking that if I was just a better wife, a better daughter-in-law, they would finally accept me. But their hearts were made of stone. What was their terrible secret? They never thought I would find out. But I did. And it was worse than anything I could have ever imagined. It was the key to my cage. The day I found out, the world stopped spinning. I was looking for a photo album in the attic of their home, the very home I stand in front of today. Tucked away in an old box, I found a stack of letters. They were letters from a woman I had never heard of, written to Brandon. They were love letters. And they were recent. But that wasn't the shocking part. The letters talked about their son. A little boy named Leo. A son Brandon had with another woman while he was married to me. A secret his parents helped him keep. The divorce was a war. They fought me for everything. They painted me as a monster, a greedy woman who was trying to ruin their son's life. Brandon, weak and controlled by his parents, went along with it all. They wanted to leave me with nothing. No money, no home, no dignity. They thought I would crumble. They thought I would disappear with my tail between my legs. They laughed at me in the courtroom. But what they didn't know was that I wasn't crying at night. I was planning. I was learning. I was becoming strong. Their retirement was my opportunity. Eleanor had bragged for years about how they would sell their big house and travel the world with the money. They had worked their whole lives for this dream. They put the house on the market, a beautiful home with a big garden they loved so much. They had no idea who was behind the faceless company, Moore Holdings, that made an offer they couldn't refuse. They signed the papers with greedy smiles, dreaming of their future. They never once suspected it was me, the gold digger, who was buying their past. And now, here we are. The moving truck with all their things is scheduled for tomorrow. The dream of their golden years is turning into a nightmare. Richard finally looks up from the paper, his face pale. "You can't do this," he stammers. Eleanor finds her voice, and it's filled with pure hate. You monster. she spits. After everything we did for you. I feel a cold smile touch my lips. Oh, this is just the beginning, I tell them. You think buying their house is the ultimate revenge? Stick around, because what I have planned next is so much worse. If you're ready to see how this story unfolds, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single chapter. I'd also love to know where you're watching from, so drop a comment down below. Now, back to the story. Just as I turned to walk away, leaving them frozen on their porch, Eleanor screamed one last thing at me, words that stopped me dead in my tracks. You stupid little fool, she shrieked, her voice cracking. Brandon's secret was nothing. The real secret is buried under this house. Eleanor's words hung in the air, cold and sharp. The real secret is buried under this house. I froze, my back to them. My mind raced. What did she mean? Was she just saying crazy things because she was angry? Or was she telling the truth? I slowly turned around. The look on her face was not just anger. It was a wild, desperate fear. Richard grabbed her arm, his face white as a ghost. Eleanor, be quiet, he hissed, trying to drag her back inside the house. His panic told me everything. It was real. There was something more. What secret? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I took a step back towards them, towards the house that was now mine. Eleanor just let out a hollow laugh. It was a scary sound, like a broken bell. You'll never find out, she said, her eyes gleaming with a strange kind of victory. They slammed the door in my face, leaving me alone on the porch with the echo of her words. A secret buried under the house. The house I now owned. The secret that was now, in a way, also mine to discover. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the years I spent in that house. I remembered one summer, early in our marriage, when Brandon and I wanted to build a swimming pool in the backyard. Richard and Eleanor had refused. They got so angry, saying it would ruin the garden. I thought it was about their precious rose bushes. But now, I wondered, was it something else? I remembered how Richard would obsessively check the locks on the basement door, a part of the house he always said was unstable and dangerous. Were they just protecting a secret all along? My mind started connecting dots that I never knew existed. There was the time a water pipe burst, and Richard insisted on hiring his own special contractor instead of a normal plumber. The man barely dug 2 feet before Richard was hovering over him, watching his every move. At the time, I thought he was just a controlling old man. But now, I saw it differently. He wasn't protecting his property. He was guarding a secret. A secret he and his wife and his son were all willing to protect, even if it meant destroying my life in the process. I walked away from their door that day feeling a strange mix of victory and dread. But I couldn't let it go. Back in my small apartment, surrounded by boxes from my old life, I pulled out the paperwork for the house sale. I looked over the old property plans, the blueprints from when the house was first built 50 years ago. My eyes scanned the pages, and then I saw it. A small, square outline drawn under the section of the backyard where the new stone patio now sat. It was labeled, Storm Shelter. But there was no storm shelter there now. They had built the patio directly on top of it. That was all I needed. The revenge wasn't just about taking their house anymore. It was about uncovering the truth they had hidden for so long. The truth they had built their perfect family life on top of. The next morning, my hands were steady as I picked up the phone and called a construction company. I'd like to schedule a demolition, I said, my voice clear and strong. I want to tear up a large stone patio in my backyard. I'm starting a big landscaping project. The lie came easily to my lips. My real project was digging up their lies. Just as I hung up, my phone buzzed. It was Brandon. His voice was dripping with anger. What did you do, Gayle? He yelled. My parents just called me. They're a mess. How could you be so cruel? They have nowhere to go. I listened to him rant, the same old Brandon, always the victim, always blind to the pain he and his family caused. He defended them, just like he always had. He never once defended me. His words didn't hurt me anymore. They were just gasoline on a fire that was already burning bright. Then, his tone changed. It went from angry to something darker. It sounded like a warning. "You need to stop this, Gayle," he said, his voice low and serious. "Sell them the house back. You're playing with things you don't understand. Things that were here long before you were." His threat didn't scare me. It did the opposite. It confirmed that I was on the right path. What was he so afraid of me finding? Whatever it was big enough to make them all panic. And I was about to dig it up. The next morning, the sound of jackhammers shattered the quiet peace of the neighborhood. I stood by the window, a cup of coffee in my hands, and watched as the crew began to tear apart the beautiful stone patio. Every crack in the stone, every loud bang of the hammer, felt like justice. They were literally breaking the foundation of secrets that had held me prisoner for a decade. Richard and Eleanor watched from their window, their faces pressed against the glass like two ghosts haunting their own home. They couldn't stop me. This was my house now. Hours went by. The sun was high in the sky when one of the workers suddenly stopped. He waved me over, a confused look on his face. "Ma'am," he called out, "you're gonna want to see this." I walked over, my heart pounding in my chest. He pointed down into the hole of dirt and broken rock. There, covered in mud, was the dark, rusted corner of something metal. It wasn't a pipe. It wasn't part of the old foundation. It was a box. A large, metal safe, buried deep in the earth. And it was locked. My heart hammered against my ribs. A safe. A real, old, iron safe pulled from the dirt under my feet. The workers gathered around, their faces a mixture of sweat and curiosity. "What do you think is in it, ma'am?" one of them asked, wiping his brow. I had no idea, but the terrified faces of Eleanor and Richard, still watching from their window, told me it was something more valuable than money. It was their deepest, darkest secret, and I had just dug it up. It was heavy, and I knew its contents would be even heavier. Getting it out of the deep hole was a challenge. The men used straps and a small crane to slowly lift the rusty box onto the grass. With every inch it rose from the ground, I felt a piece of my own past being lifted out of the darkness. It was like a monster being pulled from its lair. I watched my former in-laws disappear from the window. I could imagine their panic, the frantic whispers, the blame they were surely throwing at each other. Their fear was like fuel, making me even more determined to find out what they were hiding. Once it was on the ground, I examined it closely. There was no modern keypad, no combination lock, just a single rusted dial and an old-fashioned keyhole that looked like a tiny, dark mouth. One of the workers offered to take a sledgehammer to it, to pry it open right then and there. I quickly shook my head. "No," I said, my voice firm. "Don't break it." I had a sudden, powerful feeling that the only way to truly defeat them was to unlock their secret the right way, not to smash it to pieces. I needed the key. And then, a memory hit me like a lightning bolt. It was from years ago, maybe my first year of marriage. I was helping Eleanor clean out Richard's old roll-top desk. In the back of a dusty drawer, my fingers had found a strange, heavy black iron key. It looked like something from a pirate movie. I had held it up and asked, "What's this for?" Eleanor's face had changed in an instant. She snatched the key from my hand and her friendly smile vanished. "It's nothing," she snapped. "Just old junk." She had lied. I knew it then, and I knew it now. But how could I get that key? Eleanor and Richard were still in the house. They had 30 days before the eviction was final. They weren't going to just let me walk in and search their desk. I sat in my car down the street, watching the house that was legally mine but still felt like theirs. A fortress of lies. I had to get them out, even if only for an hour. A crazy idea popped into my head. It was risky, and maybe a little cruel, but my desire for the truth was stronger than any doubt. I picked up my phone and made a call. "I'd like to report a possible gas leak," I said to the emergency operator, giving them the address of the house. It felt wrong, but I pushed the guilt down. Within 30 minutes, the street was filled with flashing lights. A fire engine and a utility truck pulled up. I watched from a distance as uniformed officials knocked on the door and escorted a confused and annoyed Richard and Eleanor out to the street. They told them the house had to be evacuated immediately. My plan had worked. They were out. As soon as they were gone, I ran to the front door and used my new key to let myself in. The house was eerily silent. It was filled with their furniture, their pictures, their whole life, but the energy was different. It felt like a museum of a life that was over. I went straight to Richard's study, my heart pounding in my ears. I pulled open the drawer of the old desk, the one where I had seen the key all those years ago. My stomach dropped. It was empty. The key was gone. For a moment, I felt a wave of despair. Had she taken it with her? Was this all for nothing? I refused to give up. I started pulling all the drawers out, throwing papers on the floor, my search becoming more and more frantic. I ran my hands everywhere, under the drawers, along the sides. Then I felt it. A small piece of tape on the underside of the desktop. I reached up and peeled it off. Taped there, hidden in the shadows, was the heavy black iron key. I had found it. I ran out of the house, the key clutched in my hand, and went straight to the garage where the workers had moved the safe. My hands were shaking now. This was it. The final piece of the puzzle. The years of feeling small, the whispers, the lies, the heartbreak, it all came down to this moment. I took a deep breath to steady myself, trying to prepare for whatever I was about to find. I looked at the dark keyhole, then at the key. It was a perfect match. I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a slow, grinding noise, like a machine that hadn't been used in a lifetime. Then came a loud, satisfying click. The lock was open. I grabbed the heavy door with both hands and pulled. It creaked open, revealing the dark inside. My eyes adjusted to the dim light. There was no money, no gold, no jewels. Instead, the safe was filled with a stack of old yellowed papers and a small leather-bound book. I reached in and picked up the book. I opened it to the first page. The words, written in faded ink, made my blood run cold. They read, "The last will and testament of Brandon Moore." But Brandon wasn't dead. He had just called me yesterday. Why was his will, dated 20 years ago, buried in a secret safe? My breath caught in my throat. I read the words again, tracing the faded ink with my finger. The last will and testament of Brandon Moore. It was impossible. Brandon was alive. He was angry and selfish and a liar, but he was most definitely alive. I checked the date written at the bottom of the page. It was from 20 years ago, long before I had ever met him. This wasn't just a document. It was a riddle. A piece of a puzzle buried in the dirt, and I had no idea what picture it was supposed to make. Why would a living man have a will buried in a secret safe? My hands trembled as I turned the page and forced myself to read. The will was simple, leaving behind the few things a young man would own: a beat-up old car, a small savings account for college, a collection of comic books. I skimmed past the boring legal words until my eyes landed on a name. The name of the person who was to receive everything. I expected to see Richard and Eleanor. But it wasn't them. Brandon had left everything to his beloved brother, Daniel Moore. I felt the world tilt. Brother. Brandon didn't have a brother. The name, Daniel, felt alien. In 10 years of family dinners, holidays, and celebrations, I had never heard that name. I had looked through hundreds of old photos, albums filled with pictures of Brandon as a baby, a toddler, a little boy. He was always alone. He had told me countless times that he was an only child, how he wished he'd had a sibling growing up. Was it all a lie? Another lie in a lifetime of them? I felt a wave of nausea. The man I had shared a bed with for a decade was a complete stranger. My heart pounding, I turned back to the safe. There were other papers inside, tucked behind the leather book. I pulled them out carefully. They were official documents. The first was a birth certificate. The name on the paper was Daniel Moore. Parents, Richard Moore and Eleanor Moore. It was real. They had another son. They had a whole other child that they had simply erased from their lives, pretending he never existed. My mind couldn't comprehend the coldness, the cruelty of it. How do you erase your own child? The next document answered my question. It was a death certificate. Daniel Moore. Date of death: 1 day after the will was signed, 20 years ago. I scanned down the page until I found the cause. The typed words read, accidental drowning. But my eyes were drawn to a small, handwritten note in the margin, scribbled by a pen. It was just one word, but it changed everything. The word was questionable. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just a secret. It was a suspicious death. A memory, foggy and unimportant at the time, suddenly became crystal clear. I was at a family reunion years ago. A distant cousin I barely knew had had too much wine and started talking to me. Richard and Eleanor are tough, he had slurred, looking over at them. They were never the same after what happened to the other boy. Before I could ask what he meant, Eleanor was there, her face like a storm cloud. She grabbed the cousin's arm and dragged him away, whispering angrily in his ear. I had forgotten all about it until now. The other boy. He was talking about Daniel. This was bigger than a broken marriage now. This was about a boy whose family had buried his memory along with this safe. I carefully placed the papers back inside the metal box. I couldn't confront them yelling and screaming. This required a plan. This required me to be smarter and colder than they ever were. The game had changed. I wasn't just fighting for my own justice anymore. I was fighting for a ghost, a boy named Daniel who deserved to have his story told. I knew I was in too deep to handle this alone. This wasn't just family drama. It was something dark, and possibly illegal. I called my divorce lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Jennings. I explained everything in a quiet, urgent voice. The house, the safe, the will, the 2 certificates. She was silent on the other end of the line for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was serious. "Gayle," she said slowly, "do not go back to that house. Do not speak to them. A buried safe containing documents about a questionable death. This is very serious. This changes everything." I watched from my car as the utility trucks left and Richard and Eleanor were allowed back inside their home. They walked like zombies, their shoulders slumped in defeat. They passed the giant hole in their perfect lawn, not even noticing that the prize it once held was now gone. They didn't know I had their secrets sitting in my garage. A new plan began to form in my mind, a way to make them tell me the truth themselves. I needed to set a trap, and I had the perfect bait. I took out my phone. My fingers flew across the screen. I chose a photo I had taken just minutes before, a clear picture of the small leather-bound book sitting on my table. The title was perfectly readable, The Last Will and Testament of Brandon Moore. I sent the picture to Brandon, and then to Eleanor. I added no words. Silence is sometimes the loudest sound. Seconds later, my phone rang. It was Brandon. I answered, expecting him to be screaming. But his voice was a choked whisper, filled with a kind of terror I had never heard before. "Where did you find that?" he breathed. And then he said 5 words that made every hair on my body stand on end. "Is my brother's diary in there? Is my brother's diary in there?" Brandon's words hit me with the force of a physical blow. A diary. The book wasn't a will. It was a diary. Daniel's diary. In that single terrified question, Brandon had told me everything. He hadn't asked about the birth certificate or the death certificate. He didn't care about the official papers. He cared about the story, written in his dead brother's own hand. That leather-bound book held the real secret, the one they were willing to bury under concrete and silence for 20 years. A cold calm washed over me. For the first time in this entire nightmare, I had all the power. I held the key to their prison, and I was going to make them squirm. A diary. I said into the phone, my voice light and innocent. That's strange, Brandon. The first page clearly says it's your will. Are you telling me you lied about that, too? I let the silence stretch out, listening to the sound of his ragged, panicked breathing on the other end. He was a cornered animal, and I was enjoying the view. He started begging, his voice cracking. Gayle, listen to me. You have to destroy that book. Burn it. Get rid of it. You don't know what my parents are capable of. He was trying to scare me, trying to make me think I was in danger. But his warning was a confession. It told me that the contents of that diary were so explosive that his parents would do anything to keep them hidden. They'll hurt you, Gayle, he pleaded. Just walk away. But I had been walking away my entire marriage. Now I was done running. After I hung up, I went back to the garage and stared at the book. It felt different now, heavier. It wasn't just a clue. It was a voice. The voice of a boy who had been silenced. My fingers trembled as I opened it past the first page. The entries started with the messy handwriting of a young boy, filled with drawings of spaceships and notes about baseball games. As I flipped through the pages, the writing became neater, the thoughts deeper. It was a map of a boy's life, a life that was cut short. I skipped ahead, my eyes scanning for anything that seemed out of place. Most of it was normal teenage angst, complaining about homework, dreaming of a girl in his class, fighting with his parents. Then, I found it. An entry from about a year before he died. He wrote that his parents were fighting all the time about money. He mentioned seeing strange men in suits coming to the house for angry meetings, with his father in the study. Richard owned a construction company, and Daniel wrote that he heard them arguing about being in debt and cutting corners to save money. As I read further, a heartbreaking picture of the two brothers began to form. Daniel wrote about Brandon a lot. It was clear they weren't close. Daniel was quiet and thoughtful, and he saw his older brother as the golden boy, the perfect son who could do no wrong in their parents' eyes. One entry stood out. Brandon knows Dad is in trouble, Daniel wrote. He sees what's happening. But he'll never say a word. He just wants to be the perfect son. My heart ached. Brandon wasn't just a liar. He was a coward, even as a teenager. I felt a growing sense of dread as I approached the final pages. The tone of the diary changed. The neat handwriting turned into a panicked scrawl. Daniel wrote about a new project his father's company was building, the new town bridge. He described hiding on the stairs and listening to a phone call. His father was screaming at someone about using cheaper steel and faking the safety reports. The final entry was chilling. The bridge isn't safe, Daniel wrote. People could get hurt. I tried to tell Mom, but she told me to be quiet and loyal to this family. What do I do? It all clicked into place. The money problems, the cheap materials, the suspicious death. Daniel knew a secret that could have sent his father to prison and destroyed their family's reputation. He wasn't a forgotten son. He was a threat. And they had silenced him. My revenge was no longer about a broken heart or a stolen house. It was about him. I picked up my phone and called Brandon back. My voice was pure ice. Meet me at the house in 1 hour, I commanded. Bring your parents. It's time we all had a talk about Daniel. I walked back into the house, my house, and went to the living room. This was the room where Eleanor had called me a gold digger, where Richard had looked down on me with contempt. I pulled the white sheet off the large sofa, their sofa, and sat down. I placed Daniel's diary on the coffee table in front of me, a time bomb waiting to explode. I sat in the silent house and waited. I was no longer the scared girl trying to fit in. I was the judge, and court was now in session. The front door creaked open. Brandon stumbled in first, his face ashen. Richard and Eleanor followed, moving like they were walking to their own execution. Their eyes, all three of them, were glued to the little leather book on the table. Eleanor looked up at me, her face a mask of hatred and despair. "You have no idea what you've done," she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. Then she said the words that confirmed my darkest fears. "That boy was a traitor," she hissed. "He was going to ruin us. He deserved everything he got." Eleanor's words echoed in the silent living room. He deserved everything he got. A confession. A mother, admitting that her own son deserved to die. The hate in her voice was so pure, so cold, it felt like it could freeze the air. I looked at Richard and Brandon. They were pale, their faces frozen in horror, not because of what she said, but because she had said it out loud. They had lived with this ugly truth in the dark for 20 years, and I had just dragged it into the light. For the first time, I saw them for what they were. Monsters hiding in a perfect house. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. My anger was a cold, hard stone in my chest. I calmly picked up Daniel's diary from the coffee table. "He deserved it," I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. I flipped through the pages. Did he deserve it because he didn't want his father to go to jail? Because he didn't want innocent people to die when the bridge your husband built with cheap steel collapsed? Richard flinched as if I had physically slapped him. The color drained from his face. He knew that I knew everything. "You don't know anything about it," Richard blustered, trying to sound powerful, but his voice trembled. It was a different time. I had to make tough decisions to protect this family. Daniel was just a boy, too emotional. He didn't understand the pressure I was under. He was trying to justify what he did, painting himself as a hero protecting his family. But his excuses were pathetic. He wasn't a hero. He was a criminal who was scared of being caught by his own son. My eyes moved from the father to the son. I turned my cold stare on Brandon. "And what about you?" I asked, my voice soft. "Daniel wrote all about you in here. He wrote that you knew what your father was doing. You knew it was wrong, but you were too scared to stand up to him. You just wanted to be the perfect son." Brandon crumpled, sinking into the sofa cushions as if my words were physical blows. He couldn't even look at me. He just stared at the floor, a picture of a man who had been a coward his entire life. I turned to the last, messy entry in the diary. "He wrote this the morning he died," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. "He said he was going to tell someone. The police report says he drowned at Miller's Lake that afternoon. It says it was an accident." I looked directly at Eleanor, who used to boast about her son's achievements. "But he was a strong swimmer, wasn't he, Eleanor? I remember you telling me about all the swimming trophies he won as a kid." Eleanor finally broke. She let out a loud, ragged sob, but it wasn't a cry of sadness. It was the sound of a trapped animal. "He wouldn't listen," she shrieked, her hands twisting in her lap. "We all went to the lake that day to talk to him, to make him see reason. He was being a fool, threatening to ruin his own father, to ruin all of us." Her confession tumbled out. They were all there. It wasn't an accident. They were all there when Daniel died. I looked at Brandon, his face wet with tears. "What happened, Brandon?" I asked, my voice now gentle, luring the truth out of him. "What did you do at the lake?" He looked up, his eyes pleading. "It was an argument," he choked out. "Dad was yelling, and Daniel was trying to walk away. I grabbed his arm to stop him. We were struggling, and he slipped. He fell backward, and his head hit a large rock by the edge of the water. It all happened so fast, Gayle. It was an accident." Richard's voice cut in, flat and cold, with no emotion at all. "He wasn't breathing," he said, staring at the wall. "We panicked. The boy was gone. Calling the police would have meant questions, an investigation. Brandon's life would have been over. Our lives would have been over. So we made a choice." He paused, and the final horrible piece of the puzzle fell into place. "We put him in the water," he said. "We made it look like he drowned. We did it to protect our family. We did it to protect Brandon." I listened to their disgusting story, how they sacrificed one son to save the other, how they buried the truth and pretended Daniel never existed. I felt sick. The revenge I had planned, taking their house, felt small and childish now. This was so much bigger than that. I stood up, holding the diary tight in my hand. I understand now, I said. I walked to the front door. Gayle, wait, Brandon cried out. What are you going to do with that? I stopped and turned to face the family that had been destroyed by its own secrets. They looked so small and pathetic, sitting on the sofa in my house. First, I said, your eviction notice is still valid. I want you, and all of your things, out of my house by noon tomorrow. Then I held up the diary. As for this, I've decided you're right. Taking this to the police would create a scandal. But I'm not interested in justice from the police. A flicker of hope appeared in their eyes. Then what? Richard asked. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. I'm taking it to someone you fear much more. I'm taking it to Sarah Jenkins, the top investigative reporter at the City Times newspaper. The moment the words newspaper reporter left my lips, the last bit of fight drained from their bodies. It was like I had pulled a plug and all their power, anger, and pride flowed out, leaving them shrunken and empty on the sofa. Public shame. For them, it was a fate worse than death. Richard, the big, powerful man, was the first to break. He stumbled forward, his hands outstretched. Wait, he pleaded, his voice raspy. Name your price, Gayle. Whatever you want. A blank check. Just don't do this. Don't ruin the family name. His offer was disgusting. He thought he could buy my silence, just like he had bought everything else in his life. I looked at him, at the man who had valued his name over his own son's life, and I felt nothing but pity. Your name is worthless, I said, my voice as cold as a tombstone. And it's not for sale. I walked to the door, leaving them in the ruins of their perfect life. As I stepped out into the fresh air, I turned back one last time. You buried Daniel to protect your name, I said. By the time I'm done, his will be the only name anyone remembers. I closed the door on their shocked faces and didn't look back. The next morning, I walked into the busy office of the City Times newspaper. Phones were ringing, people were shouting, and keyboards were clacking. It was a world of noise and truth, the exact opposite of the silent, lying house I had just left. I asked for Sarah Jenkins, the investigative reporter whose name was famous in our city for breaking big stories. A woman with sharp eyes and a tired smile led me to a small, messy office. You've got 5 minutes, she said, not even looking up from her computer. Make it good. I sat down and placed Daniel's diary on her cluttered desk. She glanced at it, unimpressed. Look, if this is about a cheating husband or a family fight, I'm not interested, she said. I shook my head. This isn't about a family, I said, leaning forward. It's about a bridge. The Northwood Bridge. The one thousands of cars drive over every single day. I paused to let my words sink in. And it's about to celebrate its 20th anniversary of being built with cheap, faulty steel that could fail at any moment. That got her attention. She finally looked up at me. I opened the diary and showed her Daniel's last, frantic entries. I showed her the part about the faked safety reports and his father's angry phone calls. Then I showed her the birth certificate and the death certificate with the word, questionable, written in the margin. I told her the whole story. As I spoke, Sarah's cynical expression melted away, replaced by the intense focus of a hunter who has just caught the scent of its prey. She knew this was more than a story. It was a bombshell. Sarah was a whirlwind of action. She grabbed her phone and made a call, speaking in a low, fast voice. Dave, it's me. Pull the archives on the Northwood Bridge project. More construction. Yeah, from 20 years ago. I need everything you can find on the inspections, especially the initial steel quality reports. Call me back the second you have it. She hung up and looked at me, her eyes shining with excitement. If what this diary says is true, she said, we're about to blow this city wide open. A few minutes later, An email popped up on Sarah's computer screen. She scanned it quickly, her eyes widening. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," she whispered. She turned the screen towards me. "It's worse than we thought." There was an inspector, a man named George Weaver, who initially refused to sign off on the bridge. He filed an official report citing substandard steel supports. My heart pounded. Daniel was telling the truth. But, Sarah continued, a week later, he mysteriously withdrew his report and approved the whole project. And nobody ever questioned it. Sarah's fingers flew across her keyboard. "Let's see what happened to our friend George Weaver." A few clicks later, she leaned back in her chair and let out a low whistle. "Well, what a surprise," she said sarcastically. "Mr. Weaver quit his job as a city inspector 1 month after the bridge opened. He moved away. Then he died of a sudden heart attack, a year later. He was 45 years old." The unspoken question hung in the air between us. Was the inspector paid off to stay silent, or was he silenced forever, just like Daniel? Sarah looked at me, a new kind of respect in her eyes. "This story is huge," she said. "Bigger than anything I've worked on in years. But to make it stick, I need evidence. I need this diary. And I need you. I need you to tell your story, on the record." It was a terrifying thought. Becoming the public face of this scandal, of this family's ugly secrets. But then I thought of Daniel, the boy who tried to be brave and paid for it with his life. He deserved for the world to know his name. "Okay," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I'll do it." I left the newspaper office feeling a strange mix of fear and power. I had started a fire that could no longer be stopped. As I walked down the street towards my car, my phone buzzed. It was a text message from a number I didn't recognize. I opened it. It was a photo of the front of my apartment building, taken from across the street. It had clearly been taken just seconds ago. I could see my own car parked out front. Below the photo were 3 simple, terrifying words. "We are watching." The image on my phone burned into my brain. A picture of my home, my safe space, taken by a stranger. The words "we are watching" were not a threat, they were a promise. My blood ran cold. I quickly scanned the street, the windows of the buildings across the way, my heart hammering in my chest. I saw nothing. Just normal people walking by, living their normal lives. The person watching me was a ghost, an invisible enemy, and that was the most terrifying part of all. Brandon's warning echoed in my ears. "You don't know what my parents are capable of." Panic seized me. My first thought was to run, to get in my car and drive until I ran out of road. But then I remembered the diary in the reporter's office. I remembered Daniel. I couldn't run. That's what they wanted. Instead, I called Sarah. My voice was a trembling whisper when she answered. "They know," I stammered. "They're watching me. They sent me a picture of my apartment." Sarah's voice was calm and firm, cutting through my fear. "Okay, Gayle. Listen to me. Do not go home. Go to a public place, somewhere with a lot of people. I'll meet you." I drove to a busy coffee shop downtown, my eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror. Every car behind me felt like a threat. Inside, I found a small table in the corner and tried to look normal, but my hands shook so much I could barely hold my coffee cup. Every person who glanced in my direction made my heart leap into my throat. They had taken my home, my marriage, and my peace of mind. Now they were taking my sense of safety. I felt like a mouse being toyed with by a cat. Sarah arrived a few minutes later, her face grim. She didn't waste time with small talk. She opened her laptop and turned it towards me. "Your text message got me thinking," she said. "Richard and Eleanor don't seem like the type to get their own hands dirty. So I started digging into their past business partners." On the screen was a photo of a man in an expensive suit. He was smiling, but his eyes were cold and hard. "This is Marcus Thorne," Sarah said. "He was Richard's main partner 20 years ago. Officially, he's a powerful real estate developer. Unofficially, He's the man rich people call to make their problems disappear. My blood chilled. The conspiracy was growing, pulling in dangerous people. Sarah, I whispered, what are you saying? She looked me straight in the eye. I'm saying I think Marcus Thorne is the one who took care of that pesky inspector, George Weaver. And I think Richard and Eleanor, in their panic, have called their old friend to take care of you. The weight of her words crushed me. This wasn't just a broken family anymore. I was up against a powerful, ruthless man who had probably killed before to protect his secrets. For a moment, I wanted to give up. It was too much. Too big, too dangerous. But then I saw Daniel's face in my mind, the boy who wrote about superheroes in his diary. He had tried to be a hero, and it had cost him his life. I couldn't let these people win. Not again. My fear slowly burned away, leaving behind a cold, hard anger. So what do we do? I asked, my voice steady now. I was no longer a victim. I was a fighter. First, you disappear, Sarah said, already typing on her phone. I have a friend with a cabin up in the mountains. No one will find you there. You need to lay low for a few days. She looked up from her phone, her expression serious. This gives me time to find concrete proof that connects Thorne to the inspector's death. Give me 48 hours. A ticking clock. It felt like a movie, but this was my real life. I was going into hiding while Sarah hunted a killer. As we prepared to leave, a question that had been nagging at me came to the surface. Sarah, why are you doing all of this? I asked. You're putting yourself in danger, too. Why is this so important to you? For the first time since I met her, Sarah's tough reporter mask slipped. A look of deep sadness crossed her face. 25 years ago, she said quietly, my older brother tried to expose a chemical company for dumping poison into a river. He was killed in a hit-and-run a week later. They called it an accident, but we always knew. We drove in silence after that, the weight of our shared purpose hanging in the air. Sarah dropped me off at a small, isolated cabin deep in the woods. It was quiet and peaceful, a world away from the danger I was in. After she left, I locked every door and window, my fear returning in the crushing silence. I sat on the sofa, alone with my thoughts, when my phone buzzed. It was a video message from Brandon. With a shaking finger, I pressed play. The video was dark and shaky, filmed from a hidden spot. It showed Richard in his study, talking to the man from the photo, Marcus Thorne. I turned up the volume. She has the diary, Richard was saying, his voice panicked. You have to get it back. Do whatever it takes. Just like we did with the boy. Thorne nodded slowly. Don't worry, Richard, the man's deep voice rumbled. She won't be a problem for much longer. The video ended, but the chilling words hung in the air of the silent cabin. She won't be a problem for much longer. It was a death sentence. And Richard's words, just like we did with the boy, were a full confession, caught on tape. This was it. The final, undeniable proof. My hands shook as I saved the video and sent it to Sarah. My message was short, just one word, proof. I had just handed her the weapon that would bring them all down. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that they wouldn't go down without a fight. A second later, a text from Brandon lit up my screen. They're coming for you. Thorne's men are on their way to the cabin. I heard them on the phone. You have to get out of there. Now. My breath hitched. He was helping me. After years of weakness and betrayal, Brandon was finally choosing a side. I didn't have time to wonder why. His warning was clear. The hunters were coming, and I was the prey. The quiet cabin, which had felt like a safe house, now felt like a cage. I didn't think. I just moved. I grabbed my keys and my purse and ran for the door. Outside, the woods were dark and filled with terrifying shadows. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, sounded like footsteps approaching. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror. I fumbled with my keys, my fingers clumsy with fear, and finally unlocked the car door. Just as I threw myself into the driver's seat, my phone rang. It was Sarah. "Gayle, I got the video. It's over. The police are on their way to arrest them all. But they might be tracking your phone. You need to get rid of it. Ditch it now." I started the car and slammed my foot on the gas, spraying gravel as I sped out of the driveway and onto the dark mountain road. I rolled down the window and, without a second thought, threw my phone out into the blackness. It was my only link to the outside world, but Sarah was right. It was also a beacon leading my enemies straight to me. Now I was truly alone. I drove as fast as I could down the winding road, my headlights the only light in a sea of darkness. Then, I saw it in my rearview mirror. 2 bright lights, coming up behind me, fast. A huge, black SUV appeared out of nowhere, its engine roaring. They had found me. The chase began. The massive truck stayed glued to my bumper, relentlessly pushing me faster and faster around the dangerous curves. I wasn't a hero in an action movie. I was a terrified woman in a small car, being hunted by killers. The SUV slammed into my back bumper, and my car fishtailed wildly. I screamed as I fought to regain control. They weren't trying to scare me. They were trying to push me off the mountain. My mind raced, searching for an escape. I remembered passing an old, overgrown logging trail on the way up to the cabin. It was a crazy idea, a huge risk. The trail could be a dead end, or my car could get stuck. But staying on this road was certain death. I saw the turn coming up. At the very last second, I switched off my headlights, yanked the steering wheel hard to the right, and skidded off the main road onto the bumpy dirt trail. I disappeared into the pitch-black forest just as the black SUV sped past, its occupants having no idea they had lost me. I drove down the dark trail until the path became too rough, and my car couldn't go any further. I killed the engine and was plunged into absolute silence. The only sound was my own ragged breathing and the frantic pounding of my own heart. I was trapped, alone in the middle of the woods, with no phone and killers searching for me somewhere in the night. I locked the doors, curled into a ball on the driver's seat, and cried, waiting for the morning to come. When the first rays of sunlight finally filtered through the trees, I felt a small flicker of hope. I was exhausted and sore, but I was alive. I knew I couldn't stay hidden forever. I had to get back to the city. I got out of the car and started the long walk back toward the main road. After an hour, I heard a car approaching. I instantly dove behind a large tree, my heart leaping into my throat. But as the car got closer, I recognized it. It was Brandon's car. He was driving slowly, as if he was looking for something. Looking for me. He stopped the car when he saw me and jumped out, a look of frantic relief on his face. "Gayle. I was so scared. I've been driving around for hours looking for you." He looked genuinely worried, but a part of me still couldn't trust him. Was this another trick? "It's over," he said, taking a step towards me. "The news is everywhere. The police arrested Dad and Marcus Thorne early this morning." It seemed like it was finally over. But then his expression darkened, and he said the words that brought the terror flooding back. "But they didn't get my mother," he said, his voice low. "She slipped out of the house before they got there. And Gayle, she took Dad's hunting rifle with her." The car ride back to the city was filled with a heavy silence. Brandon drove, his hands tight on the steering wheel. I sat in the passenger seat, watching him. For the first time, I saw a flicker of the man I thought I had married, a man buried deep under years of fear and weakness. "Why, Brandon?" I finally asked, my voice soft. "Why send me the video? Why warn me?" He didn't look at me, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Because I was tired of being a coward," he said, his voice thick with shame. "I watched them destroy Daniel. And then I watched them destroy you. I couldn't let them do it again. It's too late for my brother, but I knew it wasn't too late for you." When we reached the city limits, we could see that my story was the only thing anyone was talking about. News vans were parked outside the police station and the headquarters of Moore Construction. It was all over the radio. Richard and Marcus Thorne were in custody, and the city had launched an emergency investigation into the safety of the Northwood Bridge. Justice was finally happening. But it wasn't over. Not until Eleanor was found. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. I knew where she would go. She would go back to the one place that symbolized everything she had just lost. "She's at the house," I said to Brandon. "I know she is." Brandon pulled up to the curb a block away from the house. It looked so normal, so peaceful in the afternoon sun. But I could feel the darkness inside. "You need to go to the police, Gayle," Brandon pleaded. "Don't go in there." I looked at the house that had caused me so much pain, the house that was now mine. "I'm not running anymore," I said. "This ends where it started. But I need you to do one thing for me." I looked him in the eye. "Call the police. Tell them where she is. Then wait for them. Don't come in." He nodded, understanding. This was my fight to finish. I walked up the pathway alone. The front door was slightly open, a silent invitation. My heart was pounding, but my steps were steady. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The house was dark and still. All the beautiful furniture was still there, covered in white sheets, making the room look like it was filled with ghosts. "Eleanor," I called out, my voice echoing in the silence. There was no answer. I walked slowly towards the living room, the room where it had all fallen apart just the day before. And there she was. She was sitting on the sofa, the one where she had delivered so many insults, so many cruel words. The hunting rifle was resting across her lap, her hands holding it loosely. She didn't look like a monster. She looked like a broken old woman, her face pale and her eyes empty. "It's a beautiful house, isn't it?" she said, her voice a hollow whisper. "Richard and I built it from nothing. We built this whole life, this perfect life, for Brandon. And you came and you took it all away." She still didn't get it. She still thought I was the villain in her story. "I didn't take anything, Eleanor," I said, keeping my voice calm. "You did. You threw it all away the day you chose your pride over your own son." Her face twisted with rage. "You don't know anything about being a mother, about protecting your child," she screamed, her voice cracking. She slowly lifted the rifle, the dark hole of the barrel pointing right at my heart. "I protected Brandon then, and I will protect him now. It all ends with you." In that moment, I wasn't scared. I just felt a deep, profound sadness for her, for the love she had twisted into something so ugly. Just as her finger tightened on the trigger, a figure rushed into the room. It was Brandon. He hadn't listened. He stood directly between me and his mother, his arms spread wide, shielding me with his own body. "No, Mom," he said, his voice shaking but firm. "No more. You didn't do it for me. You did it for yourself. For your name. Daniel is gone because of you. And you will not hurt anyone else." Eleanor stared at her son, the one she claimed to love so much, as he stood against her. That was the final blow. Her perfect son was not on her side. The rifle felt heavy in her hands. In the distance, the sound of sirens grew louder and louder. Brandon had made the call. It was over. The fight went out of Eleanor's eyes, replaced by a wave of crushing defeat. The rifle clattered to the hardwood floor. A moment later, the police burst through the door, and the nightmare was finally, truly, over. A few months have passed. The bridge is closed for repairs. Richard and Marcus Thorne will spend the rest of their lives in prison. Eleanor is in a hospital, her mind broken by the lies she told herself for 20 years. And Brandon? He testified against them all, finally telling the truth. He is serving a shorter sentence for his part in the cover-up, and for the first time, he is truly free. As for me, I stand in the living room of the house. Sunlight is streaming in through the windows. The old, dark furniture is gone. The walls are being painted a bright, hopeful yellow. I'm not keeping the house for myself. I'm turning it into a home, a safe place for children who have none. It will be called Daniel's house, So the boy who was buried in silence will now have his name remembered in a place filled with laughter and love. This whole journey started with a piece of paper, an eviction notice born from revenge. But it ended with me finding a strength I never knew I had. It taught me that secrets are a poison that can destroy a family from the inside out, and that the truth, no matter how painful, is the only thing that can truly set you free. If this story touched you and you believe in the power of truth, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories. Thank you for watching.